she comes in one day and she'd been out for a little while and just, yeah, she was a sex worker in Liverpool. A lot of the sex workers work on the docks. And she came in and she had no teeth, like no teeth at all. Like everyone had gone. So I panicked. I thought she'd had her teeth smacked out, by a punter or something. I didn't know she had false teeth, but she had top and bottom false teeth. Anyway, her teeth were out. And I'm like, she's like, oh, you like that. But she can't eat. And so obviously it's an immediate medical issue. So, unbeknownst to us, that she'd had her teeth done in style before. So they already had her molds for her false teeth. I left my teeth in a punter's car. She said, he gave me a couple of quid extra for a blowjob if I took my teeth out. So I managed to charge a £5 instead of £3 because I didn't have my teeth. But I fucking left my teeth in his car. So I've had to commit a crime to come back in so I can get my teeth redone by the dentist for free because obviously she can't get them done outside. And it's like that. And within a day or two, she had her teeth back. But the fact that she'd left her, you can charge more for a toothless blowjob, apparently. There was one case where victims, there were numerous victims from one perpetrator that were being assaulted with deodorant bottles, mop handles, anything they get hands on. They've been urinated on, just absolutely horrendous. And like I say, a lot of it goes under the radar because they don't want to be seen to be grassing. But you can pick it up. You can pick it up with women. I actually walked in on a woman trying to do it to another woman, a decrutching to try and get the drugs. And the woman that had the drugs on her and had been victim, she was like, oh no, we were just fooling around, we were just making out, we were just having a kiss. I'm like, but I couldn't prove it. I can't prove it. I can't, but I knew it because the perpetrator was on top of her and a hand was going where to get the drugs. But when you've got a victim that says no, it was just making out, what can you do? This is going to go off. So I turned round and I put the kettle and the iron on the side, and next thing she had me in a headlock, and it happened like that. And she had me in a headlock and I was literally having the shit punched out of my head and I'm being swung around by my neck. So all the things that you're trained to do, so you're trained to get out of like choke holds and you're trained to block punches and things like that. But I was literally like a rag doll. She was dragging me around. She was just punching every part of my head, my neck. The neck was being dragged around like whiplash.
So Holly, just to get back to your time in the female prison.
Yes.
There's some interesting characters, interesting stories, something that I wouldn't have expected. I had in my head that a female prison would be quite tame and quite a lot tamer than a male prison for some reason, but that's not the case.
No,
your experience.
Far from it.
Could you maybe give an insight into what type of offences they were in for usually, and what kind of characters you had?
Well, just to sort of set the background with females. So this is the case with male prisoners, but not to the extent that it is with female prisoners. So at least, I would say, at least 80% of them have been of sexual abuse or some kind of childhood trauma. Um, a lot, again, around the 70-80% mark are drug users. And we're talking heroin, crack, the serious stuff. A lot of sex workers. And the majority are suffer with extreme mental health issues. So suicide and self-harm rates are through the roof in comparison to the male estate. Um, talking about some very damaged individuals. You're talking about people that are incredibly violent, incredibly traumatized. Personality disorders are very present, particularly borderline personality disorder, which I want to go on and speak about later on. So self-harm is rife, and we're talking sort of major self-harm, not just a little nick to the arm or whatever. We are talking sort of bleed out type of self-harm, throats, arms, legs, whatever they can get to. And people say, oh, how do they get stuff to self-harm with? We do issue razors in prison, and we do expect them back, but sometimes they come back broken. There is literally, they will self-harm with anything: plastic cutlery, drawing pins, bits of glass, bits of plastic, break a TV just to get some plastic to cut themselves. So we are talking a incredibly volatile, damaged population, and unfortunately a lot of them are mothers as well. So it's a very mixed bag. And without sounding this isn't sexist at all, it just is what it is. Chuck some hormones in there as well. So it's a well-known fact that when a large group of females congregate together, their menstrual cycles come in sync. So Woby Tide, when there was a full moon, because full moons did affect them, I'll definitely talk about that, and PMT, on top of withdrawing from drugs, mental health issues, blah, 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 blah. So you say that you think they're tame. We are talking crazy motherfuckers, and I mean crazy. So my God, I could just talk for about 3 hours just on all the things that I saw, all the things that I witnessed. There were some that stayed with me. I call it the Carrie incident. And when I say Carrie, I mean as in the Stephen King film. I don't know if you've seen it, where she ends up going to the prom and she ends up with a load of pig's blood coming over her. So we would have, when I worked on the wing, say we had 170 prisoners, probably 100 of those would be on suicide or self-harm watch. So you literally spend your day going from cell to cell to cell, just checking that they've not self-harmed. So I went to this cell one day, and I can't remember if she was at risk, because from my experience, the ones that act out and do self-harm are not the ones that are at risk of suicide. It's the quiet ones, it's the ones that don't advertise their problems, that the ones that don't kick the loudest, the ones that don't shout the loudest. They're the ones that are at risk of suicide. So I had no reason to go to this cell other than I can't even remember. I don't know if she pressed a bell or she was on her own. She was definitely on her own in the cell. So I walk into the cell, and they had light fittings, and she is suspended by light fittings. She's got bed sheet around her neck, and she's suspended. So just to give sort of another bit of context, suspension hangings. So you can self-strangulate and hang yourself. You could hang yourself off a chair, you can hang yourself off a radiator, any sort of place where you can sort of attach a ligature to. However, suspension ligatures, so that's where people, their feet are off the floor, are the quickest way to die. They're the most serious and the quickest way to die. So we go in. I went in, sorry, on my own, and there's a suspension hanging. So you're trained, and your natural instinct is to go in and lift them up. So you've got to lift them up, and then you need someone then to come in and cut the ligature. However, I go in, and she's head to toe in blood as well. So you can imagine the scene. It's like something out of a horror film, yeah? It's Carrie combined with a horror film, combined whatever you can think of, hanging from the ceiling, feet off the ground, head to toe in blood. Don't know where the blood's coming from. We'll deal with the blood afterwards because your priority is to prevent them hanging. So I go in and immediately grab her legs and lift her up. That's what I'm meant to do. So it takes the pressure off the neck. And I shout for another member of staff. And a lovely member of staff called Jill, she came running in. But because she was so high up, she had to get on the chair to then cut her down. However, when you are suspended from hanging and when you are close to death, you lose control of your bowels and your bladder. So it's going to sound awful. So I'm lifting her up by a bum with, legs and bum, and she'd lost control of her bowels and her bladder. And I almost dropped her because it was horrendous. So I don't do well with shit, piss, spit, anything.
Combined as well, like
blood. So we've got it all there. Vomit coming out of the mouth, blood all over the face, piss, shit, you name it, it was there. I'm in my uniform and I go in, and again, this dark humor kicks in. And I know a lot of people, when I've gone on previous podcasts,
no pun intended, but gallows humor,
exactly. and yeah, exactly. But people don't understand that sometimes this, I mean, right, you think of a normal person, you, for example, how would you react if you weren't trained to deal with that? How would you react when you walked in?
Not very well, I'm guessing.
Exactly. You'd probably kick in some sort of help mode, but you're going to be traumatized, aren't you?
Mm.
Well, for us, it was just another day. So we go in, and I'm lifting her up, and I'm saying to Jill, I said, she fucking stinks. I need to let go. And she's going, don't let go. I haven't cut her down yet. I can't get through, because sometimes it's so tight. So you could either cut the suspension or you could cut the ligature underneath there. And she's like, don't fucking let go. And I'm like, I can't cope. I think I've got shit on my shoulder. I can't cope with it. She's like, don't fucking drop her. So I'm there, allowing the shit to go on me, and she cuts her down. We lay her down. So now we've got to deal with the blood. Okay, so we've managed to get the ligature off her neck, which is quite severe, but she's breathing. So we're like, brilliant, don't have to give her CPR, because the thought of giving some CPR that's covered in blood is really quite a disgusting thought, especially considering lots of them have blood-borne diseases. Okay, so we've laid her down, checked that she's breathing, but then so we have to deal with where this blood's coming from now, because it's a significant amount of blood and it's coming from head downwards. So we're thinking, right, it's not a throat, because if it was a throat, it would be coming from a throat downwards. So we're there, we sit her up, because we're thinking, right, if she's bleeding, the best thing you need to do is sit someone up. You need to elevate them. Okay. So we elevate her and we sit her up, and we find out that she's slashed all her face, slashed the throat, razor blade, cut her face. Fortunately, the slash marks were quite insignificant. It was the ligature that had caused more of the damage. The blood was more of a added fixture, shall we say. I don't know what to say about it. It wasn't something significant that was going to kill her. It was just enough blood to make it look like a horror scene. So we sat her up. We'd asked for emergency medical help to come in, and they checked her pulse, cleaned her up, did everything. And can you believe it? She was fine. Even though she'd lost control of her bowels and her bladder and was near death, she didn't even go to hospital. She was treated on site, and she didn't even. So that would be, I'm not saying to that extremity, but that would be a normal occurrence. So, for example, one day a girl had hung herself off a window. I went in on my own again, as you do, to try and cut her down. But as I was cutting her down, she is punching and kicking me and trying to beat the shit out of me. And I'm like, wait a second, I'm trying to save your life here.
Yeah.
But she obviously wanted to die. And I'm like, I want you to live. So I'm having a full-on fight and I'm screaming for help and there's no one around. So it's just, that's sort of one incident. There's Do you want me to talk about the woman with the feces covered?
Yes, go on. Things
Oh.
are on a roll here with the whole shit team, right?
So again, I want to sort of emphasize to sort of anyone that might have seen my previous podcast. So I really want to reiterate that when people are mentally ill, okay, we can't treat them in the prison in terms of forcing any sort of medication or any sort of physical treatment on them. We are not allowed. In hospital, they are allowed. Okay. So people, when I've told this story before, say it's disgusting that she was left for 7 days, etc., etc. I just want to reiterate that this is not the fact that we left her for 7 days. We spent 7 days desperately trying to get her to a psychiatric hospital. So you're talking a complete lack of women's beds. So in the sort of 90s, early 2000s, they introduced what we call care in the community. So they shut a lot of the medium and low security beds in mental health hospitals and pushed these people out into the community. And what happened was these people ended up in prison because they had nowhere to go. So we ended up dealing with a lot of people that should have been in psychiatric hospital from the minute they'd gone to court. However, we were left in with this woman. So she was about in her late 40s, 50s, I would say. She'd come into prison in not a very good state, and she was absolutely non-communicative with staff. So we put her on our sort of psychiatric unit, which was like a nice little unit, mental health nurses, and it tended to be sort of like a halfway house between either getting them better and returning them to the wing. If they were at high risk of suicide or self-harm, they would be on there. And then sometimes it would be a unit where they would then move on to a psychiatric hospital if we could get them there. Anyway, so she comes in. She's not in a good state. She's come off the street. She's got like long hair. So have you ever seen the film The Woman? It's like quite a well-known horror film. So she for any of you listeners, she looked like someone from The Woman. Okay, she was The Woman. So she has this long dark hair that's matted and disgusting, and we don't know what's in it. So we put her in a sort of a cell, a relatively sort of bare cell, just so we can observe her and see what she's like. Like I said, non-communicative. We don't know what she's like. We know nothing about her. So she immediately starts to, what we call in the prison service, shit up or commence to protest. But we didn't know if it was a protest. We didn't know if she was protesting against us or she was just completely crazy. So she smears herself, and I'm sorry to be gross here, she smears herself head to toe in shit. Her own shit, to be absolutely clear. Okay? And we're talking hair, face, body, and she's naked. Okay? By this point, she decided to take her clothes off. So fair dues. She's completely naked. Not only that, I mean, how this woman was producing so much shit. I will never ever know. She must have been to like an all-you-can-eat buffet or something like before coming into prison, because this shit was endless, and it was smeared all over the walls. It was smeared on the door. It was like fucking horrendous. So, unbeknownst to me, it's only late that I found out. We very, very quickly realised, and I use the word we, prison service, we very, very quickly realised that she is not well and she needs to be in hospital. We are not geared up to deal with this. One, we don't know what a mental illness is, so we can't treat her. Two, the worst of it, if we went in and physically restrained her to put her in the bath, we would be accused of assault, because that was deemed a treatment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So our hands are tied. The prison service hands are tied. So we need to get some authority so that we can treat them. And it can happen. But as anything in the civil service, anything to do with government, there's layers and layers and layers and layers of people, managers, documents, permissions, all sorts of things that you need to get. And the wheels of administration are very slow in the prison service. So this is all happening on the psychiatric unit. So one day, because I like to scrap, mate. I like to little fight from now and again. So in the prison service, when you are going in to restrain someone, you need 3 people, okay? And I was always volunteering. So when you volunteer, it not only gets you out of the boring shit that you're doing.
No pun intended, like.
Exactly, yeah. So you get out of doing the boring job that you're doing, then you get like a couple of hours afterwards to let the adrenaline come down and do the paperwork. So basically, by the time you've like done a restraint, the whole shift could have gone. So not only that, I enjoyed a scrap. Anyway, I'm on my wing, my place of work. It's the end of lunch, and our senior officer comes in. He says, "We've got a planned removal to do. There's a woman that needs restraining and taking to the bathroom." And I thought, I didn't know at this point that she was head to toe in shit. I had no clue. I just thought it was some crazy woman that just needed a bath. That's all I thought. So me and 2 others volunteered. We're like, yeah, we'll do that. That's absolutely fine. We started to get a bit concerned when we got up to the unit and they gave us like the equivalent of NBC suits. Do you know what an NBC suit is?
No.
So it's like a nuclear biological warfare suit that you put on top of your normal gear to protect you from anything. So it's like a white suit, okay? So when you go into restrain someone, you have to put full riot gear on.
It's like Homer Simpson's suit when he walks a nuclear power plant, is it?
Exactly. So
the theme tune to Simpsons.
So you put the suit. So before you do restraint, so you put knee guards in, elbow guards in. You have a helmet. You wear really thick leather gloves in case there's like glass on the floor or whatever. So you have a boiler suit on top of that. So you have your uniform on, then you have your like protective armor on, then you have your boiler suit on. Then we had these NBC suits on. Then we had a mask on, and then we had a helmet on. Right? So we're hot as fuck. We are sweating our tits off already. And then they tell us what we're going into and what we have to do. And I was like, when you think that's probably the single worst decision I've ever made in my life. Go on, you look like you're going to say something.
Did you watch Father Ted?
Yes.
There was a scene where Ted had to get a similar suit to get Jack ready for his yearly bath. I'm pretty sure. So that's just
it'll be something. Yeah, it'll be something.
Yeah. So that just came into my head there the way you're describing that.
Yeah. So we went and looked through the hatch and we realised what we'd let ourselves in for. And at that point, you can't back out. You can't suddenly say, no, I don't want to do this. I'd volunteered. This is part of our job. This is what we're expected to do. This is why we get paid and the benefits that we get. So I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. So me and two friends went in. She was relatively placid. She didn't fight with us or anything, but we had to escort her. I say escort her, but she was sort of wrapped up by me and two colleagues. We had to escort her from her cell to the bathroom. So the bath had already been run. Okay. So I can't describe how small this bathroom was. Okay. I'm not good with like sizes and feet and things like that. But let's just say it was fucking tiny. There was a bath in there that was steaming hot, and there was a radiator on that was steaming hot. So think of where we're at here. We're already hot. We're already sweating. I get really nauseous when I get hot. So this isn't good. I've got a mask on. I've got a helmet on. Yeah, I just hate it. So we can still smell everything through the mask. It's nothing stopping the smell. So we restrain her and we walk into this tiny, tiny space. So literally, if you think there's a nurse in there ready to get her in the bath and scrub her down, we might have to hold her down. We might not. Depends on how she reacts. She had a literal scrubbing brush and a scourer. Okay, she was that fucking caked in it. And the plan was she just literally had to have bath after bath after bath until it had gone. But then she started to be a bit non-compliant. She didn't want to get in the bath. So we had to get on the floor. And we're like this, we're hunched in. We've got the radiator on one side, full blast. We've got a steamy bath next to us, full blast. We've got a woman covered in shit, and there's three of us crammed in. So at that point, the helmet and the mask was getting too much. And I'm thinking, I'm either going to vomit or I'm going to pass out. I need some sort of fresh air, regardless of what that air smells like. So you can, when you're doing a restraint, have your helmet removed. So all three of us decided that someone could come in and take our helmets and our masks off. And at that point, the smell really hit me. So I was like, so it's like, what do I do? Do I either vomit or do I let go, or what do I do? I'm gonna, I feel really sick. And I'm saying this to my colleagues. I'm saying, I'm going to vomit. I'm going to vomit. Something needs to happen. I need to get out of here. But she was fighting. You can't just let go of a woman who's fighting. So luckily, really, again, a really, really good friend of mine called Karen used to have this lovely bouffant coiffed hair every single day. And I'm sure she used to use a can of hairspray every day. And she said to me, stick your nose in my hair. I've got a shit ton of hairspray on. And that's what I did. I was like that with my nose in her hair. And that's how we continued the restraint. And we had to physically, and I kept my nose in her hair the whole way. So we physically had to lift her and put her in the bath. Fortunately, she'd stopped fighting and the scrubbing could begin. But I had to get out of there because I've never, ever, ever felt so sick in my entire life. Um, Apart from another time when a woman came into reception, this is gross, okay, and I felt dead, dead sorry for her. She wasn't well. She had, cat in the hat, like that, really
Mm.
big hat, yeah.
Mm.
She had a cat in the hat, and she had a load of dreadlocks, like like pushed up like that in a cone. When you come into reception, you have to be completely strip searched. So you have, literally all clothes off, hat off, everything. And she's not well, bless her. And we go to search her, and she's refusing to take her hat off. And we said, you have to, because you could have anything hidden in there. You could have knives, drugs, whatever. We thought she looked a bit odd, and she was wearing hippie-ish clothes. So we thought, dreadlocks, hippie clothes, maybe go together. And we had to insist, and she was mortified. She was so embarrassed. We peeled this hat on, and it was crawling with lice and insects. And I mean, absolutely crawling. And the whole thing was a solid mass and you could see the lice, and it was physically moving. It I can't even think about it now. It makes me feel sick. It was physically moving. It was that full of lice. So I just felt dead sorry for her. I said, we need to sort this out. And she said, I don't want to cut my hair. She's a woman, as a woman, sort of your hair is your pride a little bit, and you don't want to. And even with everything that was going on, I mean, obviously she was mentally ill. She hadn't been looking after herself. It wasn't her fault. She hadn't done this, on purpose. But we were like, we're gonna have to shave your hair off. We're literally gonna have to shave it
Get
off.
rid of it,
But
like, yeah.
but she was refusing. And as I said about the shit woman, we can't physically insist if she's saying no because it's physically doing something to her without her consent. It's classed as an assault. So we took hours and hours persuading her, and eventually we managed to. We didn't have to shave it off, I think, as I remember. We had to start cutting bits off. And as we were cutting bits off, the hair was coming down. Oh God, I can't think. Well, it's really difficult to think about. And then they were having to give her like nit and lice treatment, and I think she had like scabies and stuff. It was just, but to see this thing crawling alive with insects, I think I'm not sure which is worse. I'm not sure whether that was worse or the shit woman was worse, but they were both equally like, I don't do lice, don't do insects, don't do bodily fluids. So yeah, that was pretty horrendous.
One of the main, there was a few prisoners you had in the female prison that suffered from Munchausen syndrome.
Mm-hmm. Yep, yep, yep,
And
yep.
that kind of fascinated me a little bit. Could you maybe just explain what that is to our viewers?
So it was actually Munchausen by proxy. So Munchausen syndrome on an individual is a condition whereby you crave attention, and it's predominantly medical attention. So you will fake symptoms, stuff like that, to get things like exploratory surgeries. You'll go in and they'll persistently say, don't know what's wrong. In America, obviously, they can go from different hospitals to different hospitals because you pay. Whereas in England, you pretty much get stuck where you're living. But yeah, very common that they'll go in, have exploratory surgeries, have lots of things done. We'll say they've got cancer, all this, and it's all bullshit. Quite a weird, psychiatric problem. Munchausen by proxy is even worse. So Munchausen by proxy is when you and it is predominantly the mother to their child. There has been cases of men doing it, but it's predominantly a mother to a child. So it's where you again crave that attention from a medical perspective of harming your child, either harming your child to create symptoms that require treatment, or just feigning, illnesses. But predominantly they will, there's things like giving them too much salt, you know, um, suffocating them so they pass out, or saying that they've had seizures, or, uh, giving them drugs that they shouldn't have. So maybe giving them adult drugs that might induce some sort of seizure or something. So there was a case recently, a girl called Gypsy and her mother, Gypsy Rose, and her mother Blanchard, um, and she kept her in a wheelchair. They've made documentaries about it and films about it, and she kept her in a wheelchair probably for about 20 years, even though she could walk. And she persuaded everyone that the daughter had cancer. The poor daughter had a tracheotomy, had things like feeding tube and things like this, when there's absolutely nothing wrong with her. Now, that girl flipped out and ended up killing her mother. understandably. But in England, obviously it's a prosecutable offence, and quite often these children die, which is horrendous. And there was a unit specifically for women that had murdered their children, and there isn't anymore. Quite interestingly, these women child killers mix in with the general population. But at the time I worked there was a unit specifically for these women that had murdered their children by Munchausen by proxy, and female sex offenders, which I didn't even know existed, but they did, and they were there. Whereas nowadays you've got, there's been loads of high profile murders of kids, abuse, torture of young children. And I think the most recent one was a woman called Savannah Phillips, who murdered I think she's a 16-month-old baby, the daughter of a girlfriend. She now would be in the general population because they don't separate unless it's really, really bad and, they're getting attacked all the time. They don't separate them. And my view is they deserve to be in the normal population. You need to, if you do the crime, you need to act, you need to be aware of the consequences. So yeah, I found it very, very bizarre working with women that had intentionally, albeit, from a psychiatric perspective, I found it very disturbing mainly to work with women that had killed, and this is even prior to me being a mother. Being a mother now and reflecting back on it, I just think, how the hell can this happen? Because it is absolutely goes against every cell in your body, because we are programmed to protect our children, not kill our children. And I found it disturbing at the time. They were very unproblematic prisoners. They were very oh, woe is me, I'm the victim, I feel down, I want to self-harm, da 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 da. They were very like meek and mild, and I just think bullies pick on people weaker than them, don't they? So, but not making excuses for them, but again, a lot of them came from sort of traumatic backgrounds, lifestyles, families, and unfortunately, these children ended up dead, or some of them survived. But I do know there was one case where a woman had consistently tried to harm her child to get her into hospital. I think she got 15 years.
It's kind of a control tactic, isn't it? Especially if the children survive. Then in later years, like that, they're keeping them at home because you're sick, you need to stay at home.
Yeah,
And like it's kind of a
ve-
way of keeping them.
very, very weird. Very sort of, like I say, in a sort of morbid way. It's interesting. I find it interesting from a sort of psychological, psychiatric perspective, but actually physically dealing with them, I just really struggled with. I didn't, the gate, my skin crawled around them. I literally couldn't deal.
I was looking up Munchausen when I heard you talk about that in Sean Atwood, and Munchausen is kind of named after a spoofer, kind of
Yes.
A Walter Mitty type character.
Yep, yep,
And
yep.
I could think of a few other people whose name would have been attributable as well. They could have been named after them as well, but we we won't go there. But basically, it's that was the first time I come across that, to be honest. So that was very
Right.
interesting to hear. So thank you for enlightening me on that. As you just said there about, I always had I couldn't understand, like you, women who would sexually assault their own kids as well. Like, as you said,
Mm.
it goes against the laws of nature, and that must have been very difficult for you to deal to deal with as a woman
Yeah,
yourself and as a mother,
yeah,
even though you weren't a mother at the time. But
more so than dealing with male sex offenders. I mean, I hated dealing with male sex offenders, but
It's like Ghislaine Maxwell, isn't it? The people have more hate for Ghislaine Maxwell than Epstein. In a lot of cases.
yeah,
That's fair to
yeah,
say.
because it's like, where's the sisterhood? Where's the motherly?
Yeah.
I mean, not. I don't think she was a mother. I don't think she had kids, but yeah, it's that sort of
Hopefully not. Anyway,
sisterhood.
pimp
It's
them
like,
out.
yeah, it's like, you look after each other, and like I say, we work with the female prisoners, and even though some of them were sort of really difficult, really problematic, you still formed a bond with them. You still had some sort of an emotional bond with them, because a lot of these women were revolving door type prisoners. So you would see them week in, week out. You'd spend all year with them. And, you formed like a motherly, sisterly, you formed some sort of emotional connection with them. And you like to work with people that horrifically sexually abuse their children, videoed on camera, sexually abusing their children. It just makes me, and particularly like when this one particular prisoner, she blamed her husband for everything, yet she was seen sort of, and I won't go into the sort of acts that she did because they were just fucking horrific, and they had 5 children. All 5 children were abused. She was on video seen laughing, smiling, encouraging it, etc., etc. Yet she's blaming the husband, and I'm thinking, all I want to do is smash your face in.
Yeah.
But obviously, you can't see. I treated them more with a bit of distance. I didn't ever form any sort of connection, because it was just like, no, we're not on the same level. We're not even. I've probably got more connection with a drug addict who, hands out blowjobs for £3 than I have with you.
Which brings us on nicely to the next story. Don't tell me
Oh,
about her.
bless. I love this story. I've told it so many times. Every time I tell it, it still makes me smile, because I had a lot of affection for this girl. Oh, she wasn't a girl; she was a woman. I had a lot of affection for her. She had a tragic upbringing. She sometimes lived on the street. She sometimes lived in hostels. She was a chronic heroin and crack user, and you could see it. So a lot of these women were only in their 20s, but they looked in the 40s. So she was one of our revolving door prisoners, in, out, in, out, in, out. And she always came in, and she always had a really good sense of humor. Do you know what I mean? We really liked her. We always put her on the cleaning party, because the cleaning party were out on the wings all days, like obviously cleaning and doing, the wings were quite big, so there's quite a lot to do. And
Was she
she
Scout?
was, yeah.
How did I
And
guess that? Yeah.
I know. But
That's
do you know
beautiful.
what? She had such a great sense of humor, and we loved her to pieces, and always enjoyed when she came in. It sounds awful. Enjoyed when she came in. She enjoyed when she came in. Anyway, so we loved her, and yeah, she just made us laugh. She made us smile. She used to smile. So she comes in one day, and she'd been out for a little while, and just, yeah, she was a sex worker in Liverpool. A lot of the sex workers work on the docks. And she came in, and she had no teeth, like no teeth at all. Like everyone had gone. So I panicked. I thought she'd had her teeth smacked out, by a punter or something. I didn't know she had false teeth, but she had top and bottom false teeth. Anyway, her teeth were out. And I'm like, she's like, oh, like, but she can't eat. And so obviously it's an immediate medical issue. So, unbeknownst to us, that she'd had her teeth done in style before. So they already had her molds for her false teeth. So she comes in, she, talking like that. And we were like, almost said her name then. And we were like, what the hell happened? And she went, I'm not even going to try and recreate it with the teeth, with the lips, which said, I left my teeth in a punter's car. She said, he gave me a couple of quid extra for a blowjob if I took my teeth out. So I managed to charge a fiver instead of £3 because I didn't have my teeth. But I fucking left my teeth in his car. So I've had to commit a crime to come back in so I can get my teeth redone by the dentist for free because I just can't get them done outside. And it's like that. And within a day or two, she had her teeth back. But the fact that she'd left her, that you can charge more for a toothless blowjob, apparently. And it was a fiver. And we were like, what the hell? But she just made light of it. We laughed so hard. Yeah, she was great fun. And like I say, the only reason she committed a crime to get into prison because she knew she'd get her new teeth just like that. She couldn't eat without them. She was
Yeah,
yeah.
I'd say the days of turkey, the recent upsurge in turkey teeth and all that, I'd say I feel
Oh,
those days are long gone. So that's a niche market, I would say.
I know. What is it? What is it with turkey teeth? Everyone's like going mental, aren't they?
Mental, yeah. Another thing that kind of surprised me as well, maybe it shouldn't have, but I was surprised to hear that sexual assault is very prevalent in female prisons,
Yeah.
almost on the same level as men's, by all accounts, from what you were saying.
I'd I'd probably say it's way more prevalent in women's prisons than it is in men. Um, I think women are, and I hope I won't get lambasted for this. When in a female prison, it's quite easy. We used to call them, jail gay, women that had boyfriends on the out. That so they were actual women that were the true lesbians that were gay, not only in prison but out of prison.
Gay
They
for the
only had
stay.
gay for the stay.
Yeah.
So what we find, or what we would find, is women are more coerced into these relationships. I wouldn't say they are completely willing. A lot of the time, they are coerced into the relationships and agree to the relationships because um, it gives them a sense of safety, it gives them a sense of protection. A lot of these women are the sort of lesbians are quite hard and known to be quite hard. And so by being in a relationship with them, it sort of protects you from sort of other issues. So there are women that I believe are being assaulted, although are sort of on some sort of level of consent. But forced sexual assault is common. Reasons being, quite a lot of the time, there might be drugs. So if you think of orifices where women can hide drugs, it's quite easy for them to come into prison with drugs hidden inside them, and it's not uncommon at all for other women to go searching for it and to use any implements they can find to extract sort of drug packages. So we're talking like spoons, forks, knives, things like that. And that's called decrutching, which is horrendous.
Mop handles
Cause
as well was another one you mentioned.
yeah, yeah. So that would just be used. I mean, there was one case where there were numerous victims from one perpetrator that were being assaulted with deodorant bottles, mop handles, anything they get hands on. They've been urinated on. Just absolutely horrendous. And like I say, a lot of it goes under the radar because they don't want to be seen to be grassing. But you can pick it up. You can pick it up with women. Women are, emotional creatures by nature. It's difficult for us to remain quite stoic. You know, trauma is going to make us cry, things like that. So it's quite easy to pick up when something had happened. but finding the perpetrator or getting them to say that it had happened to them was quite difficult. But it was, it's horrendous dealing. If you think they're coming from a place where they've been abused all their lives, and they're probably just accepting of it, it's just part and parcel. But yeah, I actually walked in on a woman trying to do it to another woman, a decrutching to try and get the drugs. And the woman that had the drugs on her and had been victim, she was like, "Oh no, we were just fooling around, we were just making out, we were just having a kiss." I'm like, but I couldn't prove it. I can't prove
Yeah.
it. I can't. But I knew it because the perpetrator was on top of her and a hand was going where to get the drugs. But when you've got a victim that says, no, it was just making out, what can you do? But it
Uh,
causes injury. It causes injuries. We had women going to hospital with like vaginal tearing and things like that. Quite
so,
serious injuries. Um,
you were saying before that women have a special kind of cruelty in your experience.
mm,
That's a bit different to a man's cruelty.
yeah, I just like I say, I mean, by nature, by genetics, by history, but you go back to the sort of cavemen, there's a reason women stayed in the caves and we nurtured the children and we looked after, we were the caring ones. And that is sort of what has been our role. I'm not saying that now, we have to do this, that, and the other, but we are genetically programmed to nurture and to care and be more emotional, be uh, potentially more empathic. And like I say, to see the horrendous. So I'll go back to that Savannah Phillips, what she did to that small child and the injuries that she inflicted. Now, I know she wasn't her mother, but as a female, I couldn't, that level of aggression is what I find really bizarre. And like I say, when I say a special kind of cruelty, it's like it just against nature. That's what happens. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't. Yeah, it's just really, really, really difficult to describe. And when you meet these people, and they're just not nice people. And it, like say, how can a woman? I mean, anyone, but how can a woman kick and punch a 16-month-old child to death? I mean, it's not saying it's if a man did it, obviously there would be outrage, but a woman does it, and it's like, what? What?
Yeah.
I don't think I've got that aggression in me to attack anyone, let alone attack a child, a vulnerable child. Um, and I think, when you talk about sort of excuses like abuse and trauma and stuff like that, nothing excuses that kind of cruelty. Nothing.
Another thing that kind of piqued my interest in the female prison was that there was female prisoners who were trying to get pregnant with officers so they can get transferred to another prison.
One prisoner in particular, a woman called Tracy Andrews. So for your Irish listeners who may not know, um, it was mid 90s, and actually the song "Road Rage" by Catatonia is based on this woman. So just a quick background about Tracy Andrews: she murdered her boyfriend. She claimed it as it was when road rage was becoming a thing. No one had heard of road rage before, and it was suddenly all over the newspapers. And she murdered a boyfriend, stabbed him a multitude of times in the neck and all sorts, causing horrific injuries. Then claimed it was a road rage incident, and a couple of days after she attempted suicide, not very good attempt because she ended up alive and she went to hospital. And she was being watched by the police because there was absolutely no evidence of anything else. She was covered in blood. There was no evidence of another car. There was just nothing. And she got eventually caught. The sort of damning piece of evidence was she'd been wearing these boots on the night of the attack, and they found a blood-stained knife imprint on the inside of her boots, and that was kind of like the nail in the coffin, really. But they made her do a live, what's it called? A public request for information, and they did it because they suspected her. So they had psychologists in interesting. I'm giving you like a massive backstory here, but just find it quite interesting. They actually had psychologists in the room, sort of observing her behaviour, and she didn't cry. There were no genuine tears. There was sort of like real sort of something off, should we say?
She was dead behind the
Anyway,
eyes, like.
defo. Anyway, cut a long story short, very long story short, she comes to Style. Now, she hadn't been at Style originally. So, as a prisoner, if you live far away from your children, which is what happens, or far away from your family members, you can apply for something called accumulated visits. So you can go to a prison for a short time, have all your visits, good as everything's fine, or you might be transferred because your behaviour. But only lifers can go to certain places. So there was a bit of a buzz on the wing. She was on my landing. So there was a bit of a buzz on the wing that Tracy Andrews, this road rage killer, who by this point I'm fucking terrified of, because believe it or not, for all the big licks I give, like, and all the fighting that I've done, I'm an absolute pussy. I am, seriously, fucking hell. I yeah, I'm like little Scrappy Doo. I'm absolutely useless. So she's on my landing. I was like, oh fuck. Um, so the first day I went to unlock her, and I saw her, and she looked exactly like she did in the newspapers. And she was just, I describe them like black eyes. I mean, they're not obviously black, but they're like, when they say you can see into someone's soul through their eyes, or sort of like when you smile, your eyes light up, or there's always something, isn't there? No, she had dead eyes. So I'm even more scared at this point. So she's got dead eyes. I try to speak to her. She just ignores me, doesn't speak to any member of staff, blah, blah, blah. So her files transferred later on. So normally they transfer the prisoner, and then they send the paperwork over, and then they send all the security information, etc., etc. And I believe she already had one child. I believe so, but she wanted another. And on a mother and baby unit in a prison, it's hard work because you're with the kid all the time. But it's a very cushy environment. You get lots of help, and it's quite a nice environment. And it came through on the security information. I think she'd been at Bulwood Hall prison. That she had been trying to get pregnant by a male officer. That was like her goal, so that she could go on to mother baby unit, or it might assist with her appeal or something like that. She was very manipulative, very devious. Later came out and said the reason that she had killed him, because at first she never confessed to killing him. Later on, she did say that she had killed him, but the reason being that she'd been abused all her life, and was in a domestically violent relationship with the guy that was killed, Lee. Um, but yeah, so she was trying to get pregnant, and there were relationships between well, to be honest with you, there were relationships between female staff and female prisoners. We had quite a few female staff sacked, and then because you'd have work parties, female prisoner work parties that'd be supervised by, say, like a man, a worksman, and there was quite a lot of affairs between them and the um, prisoners. So yeah, it's not uncommon, and it wasn't uncommon in the male jails I worked in as well. I mean, I'm saying it wasn't uncommon, but if someone said, "Oh, such and such has been sacked because of an affair with such a prisoner," it wouldn't like raise your eyebrows too much. It wouldn't be like, "Oh my god," you'd just be like, "Oh right, bloody hell."
But it's kind of like, no, I don't want to generalize here because I'm sure that there were some genuine relationships that emerged in
Yeah,
a situation.
yeah,
However, I would imagine in a lot of cases it's kind of like the holiday visa thing, where there's an end goal in mind.
a green card.
Yeah, and once that use has been achieved, kind of good day, Sam. After that, I would imagine that like there was an ulterior motive, is what I'm getting at a lot of the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, and don't get me wrong, I do think some relationships have worked, but yeah, I think it's more a case of, particularly if you think of women leaving prison that haven't got accommodation or need financial support or whatever, if you've got that nailed down before you go out, then it's good. But yeah, it happens in the male estate as well.
Yeah, well, I hope that it was worth losing their job for anyway. For the
Yeah.
people who did end up getting fired. Just was moving on. I had Michael Gross on my podcast earlier around the year. He was a guy who inadvertently started the Brixton riots in 1985. He put
Oh right.
the policeman's mouth and ended up being arrested, and yeah, it led to the rioting in Brixton. And that was another prison that he spent a bit of time in. And you had a bit of an encounter with the Yardy prisoners. They'd be the Jamaican gangsters, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Let me tell me how that went.
I mean, where I grew up in Hertfordshire. So Hertfordshire is just outside. Well, I say just outside London. It's a rural area, a rural county that's probably half an hour from London. Um, there were where I grew up. Um, there were people called there were black gangs called Stevenage Blacks, Hitchin Blacks, Letchworth Blacks. They were sort of renowned for all the naughtiness in the area, and particularly drug dealing and stuff like that. So I grew up knowing about these gangs, not knowing sort of any connection to sort of London gangs. So I'd heard about the Yardies. There were sort of some of the guys that were some of the guys that I sort of encountered as a teenager were connected to these London gangs. So I knew about them. I did know that they were into guns. I knew they were quite dangerous. The Yardies are quite, or were. Obviously I've moved up north now, so I don't know what the situation is. But they were renowned in London for guns, for all sorts, drug dealing, but really like heavy gangsters. Um, Again, these sort of Afro Caribbean, predominantly from Jamaica, and they speak patois, a very distinctive sort of variation of English.
Blood.
Yeah, really difficult to understand. Um, and when
Top
they speak
Boy.
it,
Top Boy.
yeah,
Seen that Top Boy. They kind of similar
Oh yeah,
dialect.
and it's a nightmare to try and understand, and they would do that on purpose, like in front of staff, talk very very fast so staff couldn't catch what they were saying. Anyway, again, I digress. I went to Brixton, and it was full. There were a lot of yardies there, um, and they used to congregate. They didn't sort of mix with the general population. They sort of stayed as a group where they were, which is fine, you know. Um, but I remember one day in particular, um, so we used to have exercise yards, and so an exercise yard is literally that they go out sort of once a day. Some of them used to run, but in the olden days when I was there, you had to sort of like walk around in a circle, and the staff used to have to observe it, or they used to have to join in. And you could congregate in a little gang and have a chat, but generally the theme was that you kept walking around in a circle. So I'm walking around in a circle on my own because no one would come with me because I was this new member of staff from Style and no one was interested. And the other staff stood at sort of like a main gate kind of thing. Um, so I do my duties as I've been taught at the prison service training college. Bearing in mind, I've only been in the job about 3 months at this point. Um, and I'm shitting myself again. Like, not that I thought they would do anything horrible to me, but just as a woman, it's really, really intimidating being surrounded by so many men that you know are in for violent offences. So I'm walking around and I don't want to be rude. That's another thing. So you don't be rude or disrespectful to prisoners just because, one, it's not right unless they're being pricks. And two, you want to get respect back. And three, if you're a dickhead, you're putting yourself in the line of fire for something to happen to you. So I always try to sort of respect them and speak to them and stuff like that.
Dynamic security, one might say.
Exactly. Well done. Well done. Point for you. Um, so using my interpersonal skills, I was approached by a large group of Yardie prisoners who were very nice, to be fair. Who were very, very nice. But quite quickly, and I wouldn't say I was surrounded because there was sort of like, I had a bit of a gap to escape if I wanted to. But I would say there was about 10 or 12 of them all surrounding me, asking questions. And the questions started off very, where do you come from? And I said, I come from Style in Manchester. But they recognised my accent because, I mean, my accent's changed now, but they recognised my accent and they said, yeah, but you're from down south. Where are you from originally? So I didn't tell them where I was actually from, but I told them somewhere close. And they were like, right. So you must know such and such and such and such and such and such. And I did know a couple of the people they were talking about. Anyway, so we're having this polite conversation. I'm trying to be as nice as possible because I'm shitting myself. And then starts again, and this isn't through vanity, this is just through lack of competition in the prison. You're really attractive, miss. Have you got a boyfriend? Would you be interested in any of us? We've got lots of money. You could stop your job in the prison service. Can I take you out on a date? I'd buy you this, I'd buy you that. And it was started to get, but it was, to be fair to
Like you're
them,
in prison, kid.
yeah, to be absolutely fair to them though, it wasn't um it wasn't really pushy. It wasn't like I felt really threatened that I had to walk away or say to them, right, whoa, you're crossing the line. It was just a bit more of banter. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
they were actually,
My Jake as well, Jake Abraham, his dad ran a club called the Babaloo in Liverpool, I suppose, and there'd be a lot of Afro Caribbean people that went in there. And what I heard, they're very respectful to women,
Mm.
like, so yeah, that would tie in with that, like.
But they have a fantastic sense of humor. I mean, I've traveled around the Caribbean, and everyone I've met has just been, cheerful and respectful, and likes a laugh, likes a giggle, gets the banter, gets the dry sense of humor kind of thing. Um,
There'd be solidarity between Irish people and the Caribbean, actually, and Jamaicans. Like, there'd be similarities in ways, like,
yeah, and
you'd agree.
to be fair, particularly a place like Barbados, they've got a strong sort of Irish connection in terms of the Irish coming over.
Yeah,
So believe it or not.
that's cool. Oh yeah, you mentioned. Do you remember you were saying there about they speak in a different dialect when they're trying to
Yeah.
thing? It's the same. I don't know if you ever came across Irish travelers, like gypsies.
Yeah, I
They,
can't understand their mind.
yeah, like, have you seen Snatch? Brad Pitt and
Yeah,
Snatch. The way
yeah,
Brad
love
Pitt
it.
and that. So like they have a dialect like that as well, which they'd put on in front of police or whatever to so they can speak. It's kind of like we have our own language, Irish people, Gaelic and Irish, so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
can be handy at times to when
Fox
you're
people.
and you're in foreign company, shall we say?
Yeah,
Um,
but again, the traveller guys that I used to come across, they had a great sense of humour as well. I mean, wouldn't cross them. They have a long memory, and the families, are all
yeah,
connected. I mean, the female travellers were worse. They were just scrappers all the time, of fiery as fuck, always scrappers. But the guys were always good for a laugh, always made me laugh, always had good fun with them. um we just didn't cross them. They kept themselves to themselves.
there was one particular day in Brixton where there was a prisoner who kind of kicked off in the waiting area. Do you
Yeah.
want to tell us about that?
I mean, I know I said there's been lots of scary times that I've been through, um and that was kind of like one of the only times that I've been frozen with fear. And I hate to admit that, because it's when staff and people are getting hurt, obviously it's your instinct to get involved, but it's the only time where I thought, shit, this could really turn out badly. So there was this guy and assaulted staff previously in the week. And Brixton was a dangerous place to work. I mean, it was so dangerous that at one point the staff all congregated in the visits room and refused to go back to the wings, um, until all the union members went, because they were saying it's so dangerous. Staff were literally getting assaulted day in, day out. They were being thrown downstairs and things like that. It was horrendous. So we had this guy, excuse me, I am losing my voice. We had this guy who had assaulted staff that week quite seriously. He was a big Jamaican guy. Worked out the gym, dead muscly, very anti-staff, and he had been placed down the segregation unit. Now, when you're on the segregation unit and you have a visit booked, if so, sorry, I'll take it back. So this guy went on the segregation unit, and because he was considered such a danger to staff, he was placed on what we call a three officer and SO unlock. So what that means is that anytime he's unlocked to go anywhere, there's always three officers present and a senior officer. Okay. So that's the level of, so it's basically, if he kicks off, you've got the staff there to deal with him, but he can't be dealt with one member of staff on his own. So with someone like that, if you had a visit booked, you would hold that visit down the segregation unit. So the segregation unit always has like a spare room, And if you were that bad, you would either not be allowed your visit because you were too volatile, or you would have your visit in the special room. But you needed staff to observe that special room. Okay, so you need all that additional staff that I just talked about to observe him. So there was a big discussion by management. This guy had a visit, and I do think staff were generally, and I think managers were scared of him as well because of what damage he'd previously done. So they were really scared that he had this visit, and so they didn't want to cancel it because that would cause him to kick off. I don't think they had the staff to have the visit on the segregation unit. So the decision was taken wrongly, I think, to have the visits in the main visits hall. So the main visits hall is a massive area, and it should have fixed seating and fixed tables. Okay, so by that I mean fixed to the floor, yeah, so that they can't be moved or anything like that.
Like a McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly, but they don't serve as good food. And especially somewhere like London, the visit centre was always packed. It's always rammed. So the decision was made that he was going to have his visit, and we were, as staff, we were all like, whoa, we think this is a really bad decision. This is a really dangerous guy. No one's got the balls to say to him, you can't have your visit. It's just not on. And basically we were told, get on and deal with it. Staffs, because when you have visits, you have a senior officer and you have about 8 or 9 staff patrolling the room, making sure that drugs aren't being passed and people aren't wanking each other off under the table and stuff. So he came through.
I'm sure it's happened before, like.
Oh yeah, of course it has. So he came through, we searched him, etc., etc. He was fine. We put him on a table in the center that we could easily observe, and then we let his girlfriend in. So everything's going fine. But just to give you sort of some context, I love a bit of context, don't I? So just to give you some context, there are sort of 1,200 prisoners at Brixton. At the time when you're on remand, you were entitled to a 15-minute visit every day. So if you can imagine, it's just like a cattle market. It's like in, out. You've got to be so regimented with time because you've got the next lot of people to come in. So it's really, really difficult to manage. And it's got to be your visits. And, we used to give prisoners a 5-minute warning. Yeah. So 5-minute warning, say your goodbyes, pass your drugs, do your kisses, do your hugs, do whatever you want to do. That's the time to do it.
It's like Zoom with a 10-minute warning on the unpaid version, like,
Yeah.
Call us ending.
So we're all gathered so we have a central table where the senior officer. So we're all gathered at the table, and one of my friends, good friend of mine who I trained with, was there with me. In fact, a couple of good friends of mine were all on visits with me that day. And we're all saying, who's going to give his 5-minute warning? Because basically, let's be honest, we were shitting ourselves. I don't care what anyone says, what any officer, however hard they are, however big they think they are, however much they go to the gym, there are prisoners that are going to scare them. And he scared us. And we said to the senior officer, you're a manager, you get paid more, you should go and do it. And so he said, right, I'll go and do it with 2 officers. So, but that looks intimidating then, because one officer could have just gone up, walked past and said, you got your 5 minutes, that's it, But they took quite a few of them to tell him, and they said, you've got your 5-minute warning. And everyone else was told they've got the 5-minute warning. Excuse me. And 5-minute warning comes, the bell rings, and visitors are meant to get up and walk away, and the prisoners stay seated. So the bell goes, people get up, but people don't leave. He refuses to stop his visit. So this is like our ultimate nightmare, isn't it? This is like, we knew this was going to happen. We didn't know what was going to happen next. So staff got up to him and say, "You've got to finish." And he's basically saying, "Fucking jog on." His missus is still sat there. So his missus is refusing to move as well. So we've got a bit of an issue. So the decision was made that we had enough staff. The 3 officers and the senior officer were going to restrain this guy and drag him off visits. But this guy knew what was coming. So the minute staff walked up to him, bearing in mind all the visitors are still here. So they didn't clear the visits room like they should have done. All the visitors are still there. They've got kids there in a play area. And so 3 officers went to grab hold of him. And when I say hell was unleashed, the tables went, the chairs went. My friend had hold of him. And when I say a pylon, do you know, when you were a kid, did you ever used to do pylons?
Maybe once or twice, maybe, yeah.
Where like someone's at the bottom and everyone just piles on top.
Yeah.
So this guy is so strong, he's literally throwing staff around. He's dead muscular, and people are trying to get hold of him, and he's literally flailing, and just literally staff are flying off. It's like something
Walking
out of
them
a
off,
Marvel. It's like something out of a Marvel comic. Do you know what I mean?
swat them
So
off like flies, like.
yeah, exactly. So tables are flying, chairs are flying. We've got a pylon going on. So we've got my friend at the bottom of the pylon with this man on top of him screaming that his finger's being bitten off. But in the meantime, he's got like 20 officers on top of him because he was so difficult to restrain. The only way to restrain him was just to weigh him down. So there's like 20 officers on this pylon, but then his girlfriend decides, oh, I'm not, letting this happen. His girlfriend starts lobbing chairs around the visits room. So we're like, fuck me. So all the men had been involved in the pylon. So all the men were there. And there was just me and my friend there. And she's throwing chairs around. And we were thinking, we've not been, because we were so new, we were like, we've not been taught this. Are we allowed to get hold of her? Don't know what the law is. Would it be assault? What do we actually do? She's literally throwing chairs at staff. There's kids around, kids are screaming, visitors are screaming, visitors have like gone and congregated in one area to keep them safe. So this woman is like a crazed banshee. So she's screaming. So she throws a chair that hits one of the medical staff. So a nurse had run down. When they press the alarm bell, all the staff turn up and a medical officer or a nurse will turn up. So this woman, the visitor, threw a chair which hit the medical nurse in the head. So the medical nurse then started throwing chairs back. So we've now got staff throwing chairs back to visitors. So it's utter chaos, as you can imagine. So we've got staff trying to restrain the man. We've got me and my friend trying to restrain the visitor. We've got other staff restraining the nurse because she's wanting to attack the visitor. And we've got a room full of visitors watching every move we make. And we've got children screaming. And we've got an officer with his finger almost getting bitten off. How we got through that, I'll never, ever know. It was utter chaos. And the only words that were told afterwards was, we told you so. And it wasn't nice. Unfortunately, no one had any serious injuries, which was lucky. But pretty traumatic for the kids, and the visitors that sort of stuck there observing what was going on. It's pretty horrendous, but yeah, it was but it was the only time, like I said, that because my instinct was to restrain the woman that was throwing the chairs, but she was so crazy, I was literally frozen in fear, and I had to be ordered. Me and my friend had to be ordered by someone to get hold of her. because I literally didn't know what to do. And I thought, if I get involved here, I'm going to get seriously hurt.
One time you did get seriously hurt was in the women's prison
Yeah,
for badly
yeah,
assaulted.
I did. Yes. And this, again, this is the only time I wasn't a pussy. Um, and I did morally, I absolutely did the right thing. But it ended up in catastrophe. So yeah, we had and I'm going to call her a girl because she was 18 years old. So to give you the backstory, she was an armed robber. She's 18 and she's an armed robber. So she ain't playing. She's already playing with the big guns, the big guys. So she comes in. She's quite big, and when I say big, I don't mean fat. I mean she's quite tall and she's quite muscular. She's got quite for 18. She's very solid. And she came in and she was very anti-authoritarian from the get-go, problematic. Bullying, she was a particularly bad bully. Really sort of anti-staff, wouldn't follow instructions. Was always getting sort of formal warnings and being reprimanded, etc., etc. So she was on my landing, and one day she seriously assaulted a officer that was working, a friend of mine. I call them all friends because we were all friends. So she seriously assaulted a friend of mine, full on, absolute smack in the face, knocked her flying. I was involved in the restraint of this woman. Should we call her Miss F? I'll call her Miss F. So Miss F is restrained after assaulting my friend. So quite rightly, my friend reports it to the police. The police take the matter further, and Miss F ends up going to court. However, I had to put a police statement in, as you do, because they need witnesses. So I put my police statement in, and she got found guilty. She didn't get a long sentence. She only got like 3 months or something, but it was added on to the sentence she was already doing. So she got about 3 months, and she said to me, "You put a witness statement in against me, you're going to get it." So I'm like, awesome. I've already seen what she's already like, so I'm already like, fucking hell, she'd make a meal of me, because the officer that she hit was sort of like equivalent in size, and she wasn't a wallflower. So basically I thought I'd be fucked. But anyway, so I put this in to our security department, and I said, look, having seen her behavior, having seen sort of how she treats staff, how she treats other prisoners, I'm genuinely pretty certain that she will carry out her threat that she's going to get me. And they ignored it, as they do, because they thought I was being dramatic. And they put her straight back on my wing. So I was like, awesome. So again, I'm having to deal with, she was the most problematic prisoner. So previous to this, there was a night that she'd taken crack cocaine, and she fought with about 8 men. And so when you're on your back, so to explain, but if you've never had a fight or whatever, if you're on your back, you're not at your strongest. Do you know what I mean? You're quite vulnerable when you're on your back. So she was being restrained. So she's absolutely off her nut on crack cocaine, and she's being restrained by 8 men, and they are still struggling to contain her. This is what she was like. This is how strong she was. This is how psychotic she was. Because when you're psychotic, you get this immense sort of adrenaline rush, and you just get the strength from nowhere. Anyway, they put her back on my landing, and I was the only one. And as much as I knew something was going to happen, which I knew something was going to happen, so I wasn't scared of her per se. I think I knew what was going to happen, but I just thought, do you know what? She's such an evil scumbag. If I show any weakness in front of her now, she's going to exploit it. So I thought, I've got to put my big girl brave pants on and I'm going to have to hit it hard. So I let her get away with nothing. I was on her case 24/7. But in prison, there's certain privileges that you get. So the more warnings you get, the less privileges you get. Okay. And there's the last tier is called basic, and it's basically you get nothing. You're hardly allowed out. You have a really shit time basically. And I didn't necessarily want her on basic because I wanted her out where I could observe her and see who she was bullying and what she was up to, all the rest of it. And one day, a senior officer, in his ultimate wisdom, came on the wing, Billy Big Balls, threw some paperwork at her and said, "You've got Miss Daglish to thank for this." So she basically lost all her privileges, and he told her that it was because. So I was like, right. So I locked her up, and when you feel like tension start, in the prison service, you get a real. I used to get a real sense of aura, or when something's about to kick off, it's almost like a change in the atmosphere. Um, and maybe it's like sixth sense or something like that. So I locked her up, and so when you're on basic, you're allowed out last thing at night, 15 minutes to make a phone call, get a cup of tea, pick your laundry up. That's it. So I just subconsciously knew. I thought I just felt the atmosphere. So it's at the end of the night. So bearing in mind, there's only two of us, me and another officer, and he was at the far end of the landing, upstairs. I was downstairs at the other end of the landing, and she gets let out for 15 minutes, and she goes to the laundry girls, and she starts bullying the laundry girls. She's having a go at them. They've lost their knickers or whatever it was, this old pair of socks. And the laundry girls were decent girls, nice girls, trusted girls. So I had a kettle and an iron in my hand because at the end of the night, you pick up all the bits that they've been using. So I had a kettle and an iron in my hand, and I could see what was going on. And I almost felt like she was testing me to see what I would do. So I shouted her name, and I walked over with the kettle and the iron. And as if I knew what was going to happen, bearing in mind, if I'd kept those in my hand, I probably would have burned myself to pieces. So subconsciously, I must have thought this is going to go off. So I turned round and I put the kettle and the iron on the side. And next thing, she had me in a headlock, and it happened like that. And she had me in a headlock, and I was literally having the shit punched out of my head, and I'm being swung around by my neck. So all the things that you're trained to do, so you're trained to get out of like choke holds, and you're trained to block punches and things like that. But I was literally like a rag doll. She was dragging me around. She was just punching every part of my head, my neck. The neck was being dragged around like whiplash. And I had 2 times I've had an out of body experience, and I genuinely mean this, an out of body experience. So I came out of my body and I looked down, and I genuinely thought, oh my God, someone's being assaulted. I really need to help them. I need to, I was completely, people say like they have near death experiences and they're looking down. It was exactly like that. Now, whether that's a trauma response or something, I don't know. Anyway, I came sort of back in my body and then realized it's me. I'm being assaulted. So I'm shitty punching because I'm not great at punching. Trying to punch your kidneys. I'm trying to punch your torso. Trying to do anything to get out of this fucking chokehold and to get a stopping punching. My head now, this girl, I'm not saying she saved my life, but saved me from a severe beating. One of the laundry girls, another prisoner, now this is unheard of because you don't help staff. She ran out, jumped on her back, and she shouted for the other member of staff because I couldn't speak because I was in chokehold, so I couldn't speak and shout for help. So when she realised what was happening, she screamed for the other member of staff, but she got the Miss F round the neck herself and pulled her off of me, which then gave time for the other officer to come in, restrain her, and then I had to restrain her as well. So bearing in mind I'm injured now, like you can quite clearly see my face is a mess. My throat is, I can hardly speak. I feel like I've got whiplash. But because there's only two of us, we had to restrain her. And just on a side note, the woman that intervened, she got time knocked off her sentence for that, which I was really, really pleased about because she, you know, quite rightly saved my bacon. And she deserved every bit of time she got knocked off. Anyway, so me and my friend have restrained Miss F, and this was a turning point for me in lots of ways. A manager was behind a gate and saw what we were doing, so it's quite clear we were restraining her. And my colleague shouted to the manager and said, "Holly's been really hurt. Holly's been seriously assaulted. We need your help. We come out from behind the gate." And he wouldn't come out from behind the gate. He was so scared that he stayed behind the gate. And you're talking like a grown ass man here. And it took other staff to come from the other wing to run on, to take over, for then me to be taken off and seen to. So it was in the old days when you were assaulted, you just expected to get on and get back to work. I wasn't sent to hospital. I took myself to hospital. So they called my boyfriend, and my boyfriend picked me up and he took me to hospital. And I only took 6 weeks off work despite a permanent damage to one of my vertebrae. It wasn't broken or anything, but the whiplash has caused permanent issues, which now cause permanent problems with my shoulder, frozen shoulder. I did get criminal injuries compensation for it, which is fine. And she went to court and she got extra time added. And she, from that point, was removed down to the segregation unit. And she then punched an officer who had a set of braces on. So she nearly ripped her lips off. And at that point, she was transferred to another prison. Yeah, so very, very nasty. I don't know whether she's still in prison. She probably should be. But yeah, she was, in my defense, one, I did what was morally right. Two, she was a fuckload bigger than me. And three, I defy anyone to get out the chokehold that I was in when I was being ragged around like a rag doll and being punched in the face and the head. I was more bothered about my nose and my teeth, to be fair. I'm like, not the nose or the teeth. So
that incident where you got assaulted, though, Holly, it kind of inspired you to move up in the prison service when you saw how the manager that was meant to be protecting you just sat and looked.
yeah.
And inspired you that you could do a better job yourself. So, like the way you're treated by the male prisoners, it was a blessing in disguise in a certain way, obviously.
Yeah.
You could have done without being assaulted, like, but it gave you a push to go for promotion.
Yeah, and it was the behaviour of the other managers afterwards as well. Really, it was like pressure to come back to work, and in some ways it was like I'm a horsey person, okay, and when you fall off the horse, you've got to get back on, and in some respects I felt pressured to go back to work, but in others I thought, crikey, if I don't go back, because it really burst my bubble. I had like this invincibility bubble. I was cocky. I was like, thought I knew it all, and I was this and I was that. And it burst my bubble. But in some ways, to take a positive from a negative, one, it pushed me towards promotion because I thought, why is this dickhead being paid £6,000 more than me when I can do his job? But two, it gave me a little bit of humility, should we say. It brought me back down to earth a little bit and thought, you know what? But in some respects, as like, I even outside of the prison service, I think one time in my life I'd been slapped, and that was it. I'd never been hit before. I'd never experienced anything like that. So in some respects as well, it was like, okay, I've got a really bad incident out of the way. So whilst I was scared to come back to work, it almost made me a little bit braver, thinking, right, I can handle this. The worst has happened. Let's get on with it. But yeah, I was definitely dedicated towards promotion from that point.